Hello, and welcome to our virtual annual discipline meeting for the 2023-2024 year. For those who may not know me, I'm Dane Lamont, the School Partnership Specialist for Penn Highland's Dual Enrollment Program. During our fall 2023 semester, we resumed our in-person ACE discipline meetings at the Penn Highland's Richland campus. There, our college liaisons were able to hold live sessions with our ACE instructors to discuss specific topics related to the disciplines that you teach. While we understand that it is not always possible for teachers to attend the live meetings, these discussions were recorded so those absent can gain the benefit of the event. Please enjoy the recording of your annual discipline-specific activity, and we look forward to working with you in the fall and hope you can join us in the next ACE discipline meeting. Thank you.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Fall 2023 Penn Highlands ACE presentation for business faculty. My name is Mark Parfitt. I'm an adjunct business instructor here at Penn Highlands at the Blair and Ebensburg campuses. And I started as one of the business liaisons for our ACE program this semester. If I didn't get a chance to visit you in your high schools, hopefully down the road we'll have the opportunity to do that. Today I'm going to talk about open educational resources, or OER, and how we're using them here at Penn Highlands, what they are, and how you may be able to benefit from them, as well as just have an understanding of this as a topic that is a really relevant issue and topic going on college campuses. So even if your school district doesn't use OER at this time, I think you'll find it beneficial when you talk with students to help them understand some of what's happening on college campuses regarding textbooks and open access texts and everything like that. So if this is a totally foreign term for you, open educational resources are teaching, learning, and research materials in any medium, digital or otherwise, that reside in the public domain or have been released under an open license that permits no-cost access, use, adaptation, and redistribution by others, and with no or limited restrictions. That's the formal definition. In short summary, OER are usually free resources for students. We kind of lump them into two categories. I'm going to be talking primarily about the content on the left side of your screen right here, but let me go over the right side quickly. So three kind of bundles of OER materials. One category is licensed material that your library or school district or college may subscribe to that students have access to. This could include databases, journals, anything else that, it's probably copyrighted material, but the library has a license that you can use it in your class. It's accessible to students. They don't pay anything extra. Other examples of OER could be, again, copyrighted material, but freely accessible to the public. So think of things like YouTube videos, maybe news articles if it's not on a news site that's locked down, but it's publicly accessible. Using those in classes, again, there's copyright on those, but anybody's free to access them. You probably, or I'm guessing most of you have done a little bit of that, at least in sharing of articles with your classes already. So that's technically open educational resources. The third component of OER, and the one that is really gaining most traction, is what we call Creative Commons licensed materials. And what these are materials that are licensed in a way that they are freely available, and in most cases, freely available to edit, share, or reproduce. There's a whole system we'll go into called Creative Commons. If you're not familiar with that, think about it as kind of an area that lives between a copyright and, say, public domain, where nobody owns it, everybody owns it. This is a way for authors to make materials available to basically anybody and have a little bit of control, depending on what they want, with how these materials are duplicated or remixed, as we'll talk about, or used basically in general. One thing we notice here on college campuses is students can't learn if they don't have the right textbooks or the materials that supplement their course. You can see here the impact of textbook costs is a major driving factor in the adoption of OER on college campuses. The impact of textbooks, 64% the students don't purchase required textbooks. Their 47% will take fewer classes because they may have to buy so many books that cost so much money. 40% not register for a specific course, so they're actually ruling specific courses out because of the book. 35% earn lower grades because they could not afford to buy the book. And 22%, they're actually dropping courses because in most cases they're not passing them because they likely don't have the textbook that corresponds with that book. I know in school districts, your students are not required to purchase books themselves. That's often provided generously by the school district. But I'm starting to hear about school districts, where budgets are tight and some of the faculty can't really update books as frequently as they would like, or just, may not be able to get books, or, the cost of textbooks is preventing the adoption of more dual enrollment classes. Open educational resources could be a solution for that, and we're happy to talk with you about that if that's something that interests you. There's also studies that show that free OER resources promote student success. So you can see here they've compared Pell students and non-Pell students. So that's the Pell Grant. And typically, the Pell Grant is a way we are able to categorize lower income students. So what they're showing here, for diversity purposes, income level is one that we at Penn Highlands are really focused on and sensitive to be aware about. You can see that Pell students typically have higher grades in OER classes, as well as non-Pell students. Basically OER classes, students get higher grades overall, and that's because everybody has access to the book from day one. At colleges, we also compare something called the DFW rate, which is the drop, fail, withdrawal rate. So these are basically students who are not ending the semester successfully in the course for one of those three reasons. You can also see there that the OER, the darker purple, is lower. So it's kind of documented that on college campuses, at least, OER promotes student success. So there's many ways to get started with OER. And I've been through this a couple times. And again, I'm happy to talk more with any of you, on one-on-one cases. But basically, the first thing to do is identify existing resources. So one might be what's available from your library. So then you're not totally reinventing the wheel. Might be there this whole time and just needs to take advantage of it. You could put together an advisory committee so that you're sharing the workload in coming up with an OER strategy. Some colleges offer faculty mini grants to convert classes to OER. Here at Penn Highlands, we received, another faculty member and myself received a grant through a statewide organization to develop some materials a couple years ago. But basically, on the instructor side, what we found is that mandating this is not the best approach. In order for OER to be successful, the instructor kind of has to want to do it. But you can see the cost of textbooks has outpaced inflation at a rate rivaling the cost of hospital services. So this slide is actually it's not my slide, it's an OER license slide that because it's OER license, I'm allowed to share it with you. But you can see where college textbooks rate in terms of inflation. So Textbooks actually are higher than college tuition in terms of inflation, if you can believe that, higher than some types of childcare, medical services, housing. I mean, basically everything. So the cost of textbooks has really gone up in the last several years. Um, Textbook publishers are also um, experimenting with different business models. Obviously, as there's a push to go digital, the textbooks are going digital, and what that has really had an impact on is the used textbook market. So if you think about when you were back in college, buying used textbooks was often a way to save a couple bucks. Um, that that used textbook market is really shrinking because there's no such thing as a used digital book. You usually have a license to it that allows you access to it for a semester, and then that license expires, and it's not something you can resell. So that's one of the reasons the cost has gone up because of some of these new models that are out there. When you're first starting out with OER, I'll share my experience. I had a class. I did not intend to really get involved with this. Kind of happened by accident, and everybody here at Penn Highlands, most people have heard my story, but I had a class one semester where I walked in on the first day, and the book that I had that I was given by the textbook publisher was different than the book that the students who used the class syllabus to buy the book from had, which was also different from the students who used the college bookstore to buy the book from. Um, Two of them were two very different editions of the same book, and one was a completely other book entirely. So on the first day of class, I realized that we had three different books in this class, and because students were buying these books online from everywhere, I just knew this would take weeks to get resolved, and I didn't want that to hold up the class. So another faculty member said, "Well, you should just maybe start using OER and you know, um, have everybody move at the same pace." So I was like, well, what's that? I started to look into it, and I immediately found a decent amount of materials that we could start using in that class. Sorry, guys, if you're able to hear that, that's my phone that I'm not sure how to shut off while I'm zooming here. The vast amount of resources can feel overwhelming. That's a good problem to have. That means that there's a lot of resources out there for you, especially in lower level college classes. So what we specialize in here at Penn Highlands, those 100 and 200 level classes, your intro to business, stuff like that, especially general education classes when it comes to math, science, those type of things. Lots of materials out there. It's totally decentralized, so there's many places to look. So you can kind of go down a lot of rabbit holes. I know it's happened to me where you're just searching and searching and searching for different materials. You find one that leads you to another, and then you start to find different variations of the same one. That's the result of that Creative Commons licensing. So it can take time, but it's also pretty fascinating. Lots of duplication, like I said. So you'll start to read a book, and you're like, wait, I've already read this, I think, and it's probably a book that somebody has relicensed and edited in their own way and made it their book. And I'll show an example of that we've done in a minute here. The content must be reviewed for credibility, appropriateness, and align with learning objectives. So again, you're just kind of going into the Wild West and you're finding things, and they may not always be what you want. They may be outdated. They may not teach a specific topic the way you want it to be taught. You may disagree with the content. It might not align to your learning objectives. This has been the biggest challenge I've had where you find a book that looks really polished. They've done a nice job with the production, but when you go through it, it's missing some of the learning out objectives that you're expected to cover in that class. So then you have to find a few other pieces to mix in with it. So it does take a little bit of time to do that. And then know upfront that nothing will match your current textbook exactly. There's some sites out there. One is called LibreText, where they um, have tried to take some of the most common college textbooks and create a mapped version using open educational resources. But in most cases, you're going to have to do some customization to match your current content, especially if you like the order you're currently using. Other books may have the same stuff, but in chapters are out of order. You got to do a little bit shuffling. So this does take time, and it's something that again, it's almost like a continuous evolution. I have found that I've started using OER in a couple classes, and then the next semester I make it a little bit better, and then the next time I teach the class I try to make it a little bit better even more. And the more you use it, the better you'll get at it. On the student side, again, some of these apply only in the college environment, but students appreciate free books more than they might appreciate free tuition. This sounds crazy, but what we have found is a lot of students who are taking out loans or perhaps having parents pay for their college, um, that money doesn't really pass through them. They're signing forms and taking out legal legal loans and documents that go with those, but they don't actually have the cash. So with books, it's a different situation because they have to buy the books themselves. So if they are putting those on a credit card or a debit card, or in many cases paying cash, that's real money to them. So even though it's not as much as tuition, in their world, it's a lot more real money. The best way to put it. Um, Also, again, this is probably specific to a college environment, but the text is available to all students on day one of the class. So, here at Penn Highlands, we have students who sometimes the first day of class, they're waiting for a paycheck. They can't afford to buy their book. They wait, the first week to see, well, is the instructor really going to make me buy the book? Sometimes they've ordered the book, but it hasn't come in. Um, OER, because it's free and usually in a digital format, is available to all students on day one of class. So our instructors can hit the road running from day one and not have to worry about who has a book and who doesn't. Another trend we see here, again, primarily because of the cost of textbooks, is textbook sharing, where I had one class, I think there were 11 students in the class, and there were only 2 textbooks. And those 11 students were all sharing 2 textbooks. That they had gone into 2 different groups and bought one textbook. They each put in, like, I don't know, $20, and they were sharing that. And obviously they were doing that to try to save some money, but it did slow down the students. Some students missed assignments because they just couldn't get a hold of the book that they were sharing with 5 other people. So again, this minimizes that. No juggling multiple editions of the same book. So again, what we see on a college campus is some students will try to save a couple bucks by buying an older edition of the book. The content is usually the same, very similar, but the homework questions or activities in the book are usually different. That's by design by the textbook publishers. So OER eliminates that problem. There's no additional passwords or logins for students to remember in most cases, because these are free and openly accessible. So I don't know if this may be something you experience in the high schools. If you're using a third-party digital platform, students have to have a login that may be different than their college or school ID. It's just a nightmare trying to have them remember what's what and which one do I use, and they forget one, they're logged out for the day, they can't get in. That issue doesn't exist. Ongoing unlimited student access to the resources. So again, these are resources that students download them or print them out. It's theirs for as long as they want. So again, with most textbooks going digital, they lose access to those at the expiration date of the subscription. Or if they do have traditional textbooks, many students will sell those back to try to get some money. Well, there's nothing to really sell back here because the value is zero. They're free. So that really helps out a lot. Also, we call program synergy. So if if you're in a small business management course and maybe one of the activities is put together a business plan, and they need to focus on marketing and advertising. Well, if their marketing and advertising class had free OER resources, they're still going to have those. So they have them that can actually enhance another course down the road. And finally, the one that I think, if there is a benefit for OER in the high school level, I think this is the one that most of you will appreciate the most. The content can be fully customized by faculty, and you can add what you want and you can take out what you want. So um, I'll show you a slide of a publisher that I've used in a second where I've done some editing, and you truly are in total control of the content of the class. You can start small and expand at your own pace. So like I said, you can start, just a few supplemental materials, and then maybe over time build your way to having a whole class run through OER. Curating content can take time, but you're not writing a book from scratch. So most of your time is going to be spent finding resources and then mixing them together, unless you are writing something, truly from the beginning. Matching content to learning objectives was the greatest time commitment I experienced. As I said, most of our class outlines are mapped to traditional textbooks. And sharing your resources with other instructors is kind of part of the OER culture. So if you've developed something or you've totally curated something or you found the right resource, there's a lot of other instructors out there who could benefit from that if you're willing to share that with them. And you will find if you reach out to other instructors who work with OER, they are probably very likely to share whatever they have with you. This is one I encourage you to explore. Maybe not, I don't use it fully, but OpenStax is a grant program through Rice University, and they publish free textbooks. These are completely free. You can go on, you can read them online, you can download them as a PDF, you can embed them into your learning management system however you want to use it. If you do have students who need or want a printed edition, sometimes for ADA compliance, we have to provide printed materials. They sell printed copies very cheap. Think like something like $20 a book, maybe. And here's a slide. I know this slide is already a little bit outdated. I know they've added a couple more. So all kinds of topics, including you can see business topics. So they have business ethics, accounting 1 and 2, statistics, business law, entrepreneurship management, the economics, lots of business classes. OpenStax puts a lot of emphasis on production quality. So these, if you actually download them, they will feel just like a book you might buy from like Pearson or Cengage or any of the major textbook publishers. I have a problem with the content in the OpenStax, the business books. I'll just be honest with you, and again, I've shared this here, so the other instructors here know my thoughts. Some of their business books, I find that there is a real bias, especially like a political bias on part of some of the authors. And I'm reading it, and it's not like content where it's like it's presenting one position, and I'm like, no, I think the other position should be presented. It's just where I'm reading something, I'm like, that just doesn't belong in there. Well, the great thing about OER is these are openly licensed, so you can totally edit them. So I've actually done that with, I believe it was their business ethics book. I've just went through and I copied the materials into my own format, my own documents, or in my own learning site here at the college, and I just delete what I want and I add stuff and I move stuff around. So, and you're totally free to do that. And that's what's awesome about OER. So again, it's total control over, so that your teaching materials match how you would prefer to teach the class. So I encourage you to check out that OpenStax. They're ready to go books, high production quality. Even if you already have materials you like, you might find some good supplementary materials or chapters in there. The content may not meet all of your learning objectives, but again, you're free to edit their content. And it's a great first step to kind of like dip your toes into OER. And then what I've kind of hinted at is the concept of remixing, which is allowed under Creative Commons. So you can take uh, multiple OER sources and you can mix those together. And you're actually allowed, when you do that, you're actually allowed to put your name as the author. So, um, for example, I've compiled a full management textbook. I'm allowed to say that's by me. And then within that, as you'll see, I have all the right attributions, but there's different codes for OER licensing. So the original author chooses these codes, and then it's like a hierarchy as these things, get distributed, the licensing follows. So I'll start at the bottom, which is the most restrictive. So in a way, this is kind of like a copyrighted thing, but you can't really do anything to it. So um, BY, when you see BY, that means you have to give credit to the original author. NC means non-commercial, so you can't charge for it. And share alike means you have to allow others to share the materials under the same license. So if you find the Creative Commons document or resource, with that license, what it means is you can't charge anybody for it, and you can share it, and you have to let anybody you share it to be able to share it as well. The next one up, when you see the BYNC, again, it's non-commercial. And the BY means that they want credit and attribution somewhere, but it can be shared however people want. And then you can see if we go all the way to the top, BY, that just means you're giving the credit, the author credit. If you're interested in Creative Commons, at first it does sound really complex, but if you take a 20-minute online YouTube video class, you'll get it, and you'll find out how really cool it is. So when you create materials, if you create your own materials, you can slap one of these licenses on it, and then other people can use it, and they can do whatever they want to. And basically, this is how this community gets so big. You can see this is the management book that I created. I called it Management 2020 because that was the year. And you can see I've licensed it there so other people can share it. That license has to follow a lot of what I use. So in there below that are kind of all the resources I use to compile this book, and I'm giving those authors credit. What's very interesting, the way Creative Commons works, is if somebody takes my book and then they're using my book with other books, basically all of these credits I have here kind of don't need to be included. They're able to list my book as my name as a credit, and it does become like kind of this weird web thing. But again, it's just the power of being able to share information. Again, you can completely customize information for whatever reason you want. So here's an example I had. So just-in-time inventory, if you teach that in like an operations management class or a management class, we used to teach that as like the gold standard of inventory management. So the textbook that I had used, the OER textbook, the original paragraph was just-in-time inventory is especially common among retail stores and restaurants. A company like Kroger might use JIT to minimize the amount of inventory it needs to maintain in its stores. Well, I study business, so I know what a Kroger is. I know it's a huge supermarket chain, but a lot of our students here, they have no idea what a Kroger is. They don't operate in our area. So also with the pandemic, we learned that just-in-time is not so perfect. So I was able to just edit that paragraph, make it a little bit more localized. So just-in-time inventory is especially common among retail companies or retail stores and restaurants. A company like Giant Eagle may be able to use JIT to minimize the amount of inventory it needs to maintain in its stores. Although common practice in many industries, supply shortages experienced during the COVID-19 pandemic demonstrate there are potential downsides to using JIT. So all that is my text. I was able to update the book. There's also lots of supplemental materials with many OER textbooks. So just as like with a publisher, you'd get test banks and PowerPoint slides. There are resources available through a lot of different sites. So again, OpenStax has again, they try to replicate themselves as a textbook publisher. So they're going to have those same things with test banks and solution guides and everything you're used to. And other OER sites will usually do the same thing. You will find they are of various qualities, but you also find that with traditional textbook publishers too. Here's an example of slides I used for the macroeconomics class. These, I believe, are from an OER provider called Lumen Learning, where it's mapped to their digital textbook, and learning objectives are very similar to how we traditionally had taught the class. Like I said, some students do require printing. Most materials, they're digital. You just print them out. They're not locked behind a firewall or have any of that crazy encoding that prevents printing. When I first started with OER, my perception was that students were going to want to print out everything. And it was very interesting because I was teaching two different classes using two different types of OER the same semester. And in the one class, the students were printing everywhere, printing everything. In the other class, they were printing very little. What I found was that the longer the chapters are, the more that your OER matches like a traditional textbook, the more students kind of feel like they have to print it out to read them. But if you present in short, I called it microburst. Our librarian, I think here calls it, I think, chunking, where you break stuff up. And you can do that in a digital format a lot more easier. You can create a page where it only has like 3 paragraphs. They're a lot less likely to want to print that out. They feel more comfortable reading that online. So I have, as I've developed more and more open materials, I keep the length in mind, to try to prevent all this excessive printing, where they can just read it and then maybe the next page there's a couple more paragraphs. So it's just a different format. It's something you can experiment with if you'd like. There are some areas where OER just does not work. So required literature that's copyrighted. So especially like maybe English classes where you have to read the novel. That the author of that novel is not giving it away for free, so you have to find a copy of it. In some cases, not so much in business, but I know in our healthcare programs, there's some situations where certain texts are mandated by the accreditation agencies, where like a certain class, if you're going to teach this, you have to use the book that this healthcare association wants you to use, or other programs, maybe like a Microsoft certification class, they want you to use a specific Microsoft authorized book for that. Where it is mandated, if there's no OER provided, obviously you have to use what you're told to use. Highly specialized courses. So typically the higher number or class you get, when you start to get into 300, 400 level graduate classes, you're going to find fewer and fewer OER, although you would be really surprised what you will find. So you probably won't find multiple variations, but you might find something out there and you'd be amazed at the depth of what you do find, because a lot of professors are getting grants now to write these OER free textbooks. And so if it's a professor who is highly specialized in something, maybe in a graduate program somewhere, and they've written a free textbook, it's out there, and there's some really high level stuff. And an example, I think it's Temple University. They actually have like their own OER publishing division where you can go on their website and you can find some really high level sophisticated books totally for free. Other exceptions, if you're required to use a textbook publisher's online platform like the My Math Lab or Connect or MindTap, any of those things, obviously those are provided by textbook publishers and they're mapped to their textbooks, and it's really hard to integrate other stuff into those. But there are actually lower cost and in some cases free online platforms that you can use with OER, where they kind of the whole concept is to drive down the cost for students. So stuff is out there. You just have to kind of experiment. Other observations, a one-size-fits-all approach won't work. So each instructor has to develop his or her own confidence and comfort levels with OER. Like I said, this will develop over time. Learning objectives will increase in importance. They're likely what unifies all sections of the course. So I think sometimes, and I'm guilty of this myself, but sometimes on college campuses, we let the textbook become the class. And the textbook is really a supporting resource. The learning outcomes on the syllabus and the instructor are really what guide the class. And uh, by using OER, it kind of forces you to to kind of cycle back and really put an emphasis on what your actual learning objectives are. And you may find that you um, refocus kind of where you spend some of your class time because you realize, well, we spent a lot of time on that, but it's not really a learning objective in the course. Why did we spend so much time on that? Well, because it was like 3 chapters in the book, but it wasn't really necessary. So, again, that's one thing I have found. And again, the freedom that OER brings can't be overstated. Again, you're in total control with how you want to present material in your class. Talked about how OER can pay the benefits of it. There are actually studies, this one at Tidewater Community College found students in OER classes are less likely to drop courses. We talked about the adoption of OER decreases drop rates among Tidewater students, allowing the institution to retain tuition revenue it would otherwise have refunded. This retained revenue provides a renewable source of funds to sustainably support the adoption of OER. So this was a really cool model this college is doing where because OER helps their retention, they are bringing in more tuition dollars, and then they're reinvesting a little bit of that to pay their faculty maybe some grants to adopt more classes to use OER materials. Here's an example of how I typically try to map OER materials, especially a class where there's not one perfect resource where I have to mix a lot. So you can see what I do is I take our traditional textbook. This is just an Excel spreadsheet. All the way on the left, I map out the chapters of our traditional textbook, and then I map the learning outcomes on our syllabus to those chapters, so I can see exactly where we're hitting all those learning outcomes. Because again, those are the most important things. Then I look at my OER resources, and to be honest, this spreadsheet has like many more columns that go after letter D, but the two biggest ones were resources through a book published through a professor at Florida State College and some free materials through the St. Louis Federal Reserve. And you can see I was able to map, at least through like the first 9 chapters, a lot of the learning objectives to those materials. And so that's how I make sure that what I'm developing, is still in compliance with what I'm required to do as an instructor to match those learning outcomes. So this again is called like OER mapping. And I didn't do this at first because I didn't really think through it. But as I learned more about how other professors do this, and became more intentional with OER instead of just, dabbling and experimenting, I've done this for a couple courses and it really does help, especially over time as you're trying to, maybe you're trying to migrate a course to OER and you're only finding like 70%, so you're still requiring that traditional textbook. It helps you over time, fill in some of those plugs where if you're just missing a couple things, maybe you can have a librarian help you find it. It's out there, you just haven't found it yet. Or in some cases, um, you might be able to the learning outcome may be simple enough that you could just write your own if you're down to just like one learning outcome. So in this case, I'll choose that one at the very bottom there, define basic bond terms. Well, if I haven't found a resource for that, it might be simple enough that I can just write a couple paragraphs myself, stick it in, and okay, now the learning objective is covered. Here's an example. So again, this is from our learning management system. So again, how I just kind of include the text. I create pages in our class with the materials, and then I put the license and attributions at the bottom, kind of format them to match like a similar like chapter, unit design. So there's usually a code like OER 4B. So this is our module 4. You can see the text start with A, B, C, D, and I always put the title of what that that unit is about to keep it organized. So here's an example of content where this is a management class discussing theory X versus theory Y. And I also, when I can, in my digital OER text, I try to map to the learning outcomes so that, when I need to go back and see where we're reinforcing everything, it's very clear where everything is. And again, another example of just being able to customize things however you want. This is our management class. We have a unit on groupthink, and there's some text about that, but like the whole thing is kind of cut off on the top. But at one of the biggest examples we use to teach groupthink is the Challenger space shuttle. So there's a Netflix documentary on the Challenger, and it's long. It's like 4 hours. It's something I'd never be able to show in the class. But I'm able to customize that. So at the bottom of the groupthink text, I put this little box. Because it's digital, I'm able to embed that link to the YouTube video. Again, the YouTube video is copyrighted, but it's freely accessible, so you're able to do that. It's totally okay. And I've had students who said, I watched the trailer you embedded in the textbook, and then I went and I watched that show, and it was really cool. So students we know are more receptive to interactive content, videos, that type of stuff. So the more we can embed those things in our text, the more likely they are to pay attention to them, as I'm sure you've all experienced. Another experiment I tried was OER text with embedded reading quizzes. So this was an economics class, and I embedded questions into the text. It's just kind of a reinforcement that they're actually reading, and then they earn like a homework grade by doing this. It worked really well. So they're reading it, they answer a question. It's probably very similar to maybe some of the online book or learning management platforms you're using. The difference is I'm just allowed to completely edit this however I want to. I can go in there, I can change that question, I can change that text, I can move things around, whatever you want to do. And with the learning management system, so here at Penn Highlands, we use DTL Brightspace. I know some of the high schools also use that. I know that Canvas is out there. There's many other platforms. We're able to, most of these systems can interact with each other through what they call a common cartridge. So if I'm on Brightspace here at Penn Highlands, but another professor contacts me and says, hey, Mark, do you have OER content for management that I can import into my Canvas site? It's becoming a lot easier where I can just export that as what they call a common cartridge, and that can be imported into Canvas or any other LMS system, and they're able to then put it in their site, and then they can go and customize it however they want to. So wrapping things up, we are not everybody at Penn Highlands is using OER, but we do definitely have a small community and initiative to try to grow that here. Like I said, we've gotten a couple grants, and there's probably more of that in the future. But we also know that our dual enrollment partners is a community where we could maybe all benefit from sharing resources. So that's basically what this creates. It's a community where we have a lot of supplemental resources or maybe even primary resources. So if down the road, you're looking to expand to a new class or redo a class, we may find other faculty in high schools have materials that they can share, or we have materials here we can all share. So we might be able to be in a facilitation role to get different materials to different people. So that's all in progress. There's a lot ahead is what the best way to put it, I guess. So that's it. Thank you for attending this session. Again, if anybody has any questions, there's my contact information. Feel free to reach out. I hope you all had a great fall semester, fall term, and enjoy the holidays if you're watching this before the holidays. And otherwise, I hope to meet some of you as I am out visiting high schools. Take care.